We have the other papers apart from the Communist Party, Morning Scar, and we haven't got the Guardian in print. We have got a glimpse of the Guardian and the main piece on the front page that we shall be kind of focusing on is the one about 450 million pounds fees bonanza for Whitehall consultants. Now, this is the kind of modest way to describe the criminals, gangsters, big business kind of operatives that operate under the guises of consultancy and professional advice and so forth. And this one in the Guardian today, the front page of the Guardian, it says it's an exclusive by Rajiv Sayal. And it says the scale of the government's reliance on management consultants has been laid bare as an analysis shows that spending with 8 top firms has risen by 45% to more than 450 million in 3 years. So on average, if that amount is divided equally, which cannot be because some of the ones are getting more than the others, but if for a general understanding it is divided among the 8 firms, then over the last 3 years, they have received more than 40 million each, 40 million pounds each. And they're all consultants dedicated to opposing society, opposing the existence of the idea of a public serving state. That is the idea. And it says, compare with 40 million 2 years earlier. Now, 147 to 40 million is a big jump. It's more than 3 times, more than 300%, yeah? And the Home Office had the biggest increase in consultancy spending over 3 years, jumping 788% to 57 million pounds as the department dealt with security, immigration, and border preparations for leaving the EU. The results of the analysis of more than 11,000 government invoices came yesterday as Boris Johnson promoted the private sector, saying free enterprise must lead the recovery from the coronavirus pandemic. In his speech to the Conservative Party conference, the Prime Minister sounded a warning about the extent of state intervention through schemes such as furlough and said, there comes a moment when the state must stand back and let the private sector get on with it. Now that's the whole point. Private sector not only doesn't get on with it, but it doesn't want to get on with it. And it not only does that, it also wants to stop the state sector getting on with it. It, in this context, innocently meaning the legitimate needs being served of the people in need of service. And that's what they don't want. So the ideological narrative in support of the white working class or those without cognitive abilities that the Spectator has been peddling That is what they want to consign. They want to consign the gullibles and the majority of the white working class, so-called poor people, low-income people, in a state of constant gullibility and lack of understanding and lack of service, lack of ability to question the crooks that control the coffers of the state and abuse it and enrich the very ones that don't want the state to exist. Laissez-faire. Now, laissez-faire is leave it alone, let it be. That means that they don't want the people in need to have their needs met. They want complete darkness for the absolute majority, while they, like Trump, actually get to grab the best that is on offer at public cost. Trump coming out of the hospital after less than 2 days and saying that he should be banning most of the public getting any support or help is exactly the model that Boris Johnson is following and imitating. And the attack in his speech yesterday on furlough scheme is not an attack on the scheme at all. It is an attack on anyone who thinks that there is a role for such a scheme in society. And currently, the person, even the Daily Mail and the Express and the Scum are, quote, mentioning positively is the finance minister in post, Rishi Sunak. And Sunak's stars have been rising, despite various things that have been contradictory in his own statements and policies and kind of contradictions. Despite all of that, he has not been accused in any way remotely like Boris Johnson has been, because of the record of Boris Johnson being clueless and contradictory, seriously contradictory and dishonest and unaccountable and contemptuous of society and contemptuous of most of the people who are following the rules that he is presenting while his own father flouts them. He flouts them. Johnson is hardly seen wearing the face mask. That is the point. And he has allowed Dominic Cummings to remain exempt from all accountability. So that's the Boris Johnson line. And the Guardian's disclosure that the consultants are getting these hundreds of millions of pounds should be seized on by all Democrats, all the supporters of democracy and accountability, regardless of party or whatever. And they must demand an end to that and also demand a full item by item listing of the benefits of the funding of the biggest crooked consultant outfits. Deloitte's the biggest crooked firm that has been pocketing the most. And there is no indication in the Guardian piece as to what the benefit has been of this consultancy. There is no correlation. There is no connection, that is, between the alleged consultancy and any supposed benefit that the consultancy has actually given rise to or engendered. And that is where the Guardian is missing the point. Because the Guardian should not be just running that kind of so-called exclusive, but should be actually pointing out that there is no analysis of the actual correlation available. For a start, analysis has been only partly about the sums of money that has been spent on consultancy, but in the last 3 years. This one is about the last 3 years. The focus is on the last 3 years. Of course, the longer context is longer. Now, The Guardian is doing that, and it's not mentioning any source from the Labour Party, or indeed from the SNP or any other party that should be mentioned and should be actually discussing this kind. So we have no idea as to what the kind of agenda, what the agenda is for the Labour Party in Parliament, as fronted by Keir Starmer on issues like that. And this is not an isolated absence of any narrative that is alternative to the lootery by the cons. This is part of the overall holistic emptiness of narrative that is for society, for democracy, for accountability, for transparency, for equality and universality and universal diversity. There is nothing coming from the Labour Party in the House of Commons, which is where the main elected cabal is. And that is the bleak prospect for society. Ordinary people who are not members of parliament, ordinary people who are not holding positions of publicly paid kind of remuneration in the name of serving the public. And ordinary people with the ideas and the evidence and the expertise and the actual empirical knowledge are denied any say by the system, which is a corrupt, anti-democratic system. And those MPs who are kind of basking on the reflected glory of their own little rebellion, voting against the racist kind of piece of legislation in the last few days, they must not be carried away in being described as rebel Labour MPs. They are not rebels in any shape or form. They are only exercising the option that is available, either vote yes or no. Voting against a repressive, racist, reactionary, extra sub-fascistic measure that has to be treated as ordinary voting with a conscience on the evidence, not rated as rebellion. In the House of Parliament, well, mainly the House of Commons, there has been no rebellion. There is no rebellion. There is never any rebellion. Voting against either yes or no. No doesn't constitute rebellion. It's the least that you can do within the options available. And the options are only two. Well, abstaining is not really an option, but abstaining can be done, but that doesn't amount to anything, really. That amounts to complete, absolute kind of surrender of your conscience. So abstaining is not a very courageous thing at all. So the least that an MP can do is to vote again, against a measure, against a bill, against a motion. So the fact that these particular MPs, 17, 18, 19, whatever, mainly Labour Party card-carrying MPs, have been praised as rebellious is wrong, and it is giving them false sense of achievement. Because despite their vote, the motion has got carried away or carried by the overwhelming majority that exists in the House of Commons for the Conservatives. Even if the Labour Party had all of them, if the entire Labour Party membership of the House of Commons had voted against that motion would still get through. That is what the built-in kind of corruption that Johnson has been given by Jeremy Corbyn, who should never have agreed to having that vote, that election in December 2019 or in 2019 at all. Because if that election was not colluded with by Brexiteering Corbyn, Johnson would have been stuck, and the Conservatives would have been stuck in a very serious parliamentary crisis. That would be crisis. And that would rate as an occasion or as an opportunity for certain important kind of issues to be voted on. And if the significant numbers of MPs at that time, with the pre-12 December 2019 kind of size of the Conservative MPs, if that were the kind of level of the numbers that the Conservatives had on their side in the House of Commons, then there would have been events that could qualify to be described as a rebellion. But Corbyn gave all that away. And his so-called former kind of disciples or supporters or fans, whatever, staging a token kind of no against the Tory measure is neither here nor there. The reason once again is not that they haven't made a significant kind of stand, that they have personally on their CVs. But numerically, the House of Commons is such a kind of no-go area for any opposition to defeat any Conservative bill, that no matter, even if the entirety of the Keir Starmer fronted Labour parliamentary kind of number voted against that measure, the Tories would still win. Remember, because the Tories have got around 80 members majority, which means that they are 80 more than the combined numbers of Labour, SNP, Green, whatever other parties. So they are not in a coalition. They are in a single party majority, which gives them numerically exemption from accountability and almost impunity from accountability, from democratic accountability. And this is something that is still not being discussed by the Labour Party outside the House of Commons. The Labour Party has got various outlets on the social media, and these are as ignorant and as ill-briefed and ill-read now as they have been for the last 50 years, 60 years. There are completely exaggerated kind of importance these outlets are attaching to themselves. One is a Labour list or Labour listing, and another one is left foot forward, which is completely a right-wing kind of thing set up by the son of the war criminal Jack Straw. And there is another thing that is coming, which is publishing other people's videos on YouTube. And it has got no narrative. It has got no substantial substance to it. And it's not original. It's copying stuff from all over the place and over-exaggerating the importance of those particular ones that it copies in terms of exposing the Conservatives. That is not happening. That is what they are hoping, they are actually suggesting, but that is not having the impact. That is not the impact that it is having, if you like. It's a recent kind of beginning, the online video kind of pinching other people's videos and carrying those as if they're doing right research. They're not doing anything like the correct, democratic, rigorous research whatsoever. Now, as someone who actively told off Tony Blair before 1977, in the short years that he was kind of leader before the election in May 1997, I had extensive communications sent to these two, particularly this one, Mandelson, and I had a few sent to Jack Straw about crime and criminality. And the idea of antisocial behavior was actually contained in my analytical communications. Well, they haven't credited me with that, but I'm not particularly bothered about getting credit for that or not, because I have more original stuff I have put forward as part of my campaigning analysis, than just that idea. But the antisocial behavior itself, although I had given the analysis, has not been properly implemented. It's based on my idea, but it is not properly implemented, because neither Straw nor Blair, nor the others that were in their kind of regime post to the 1997 election, none of them has got the commitment to society in the way that they should have, in order to make the idea of protecting society from criminals inside the communities effective. So therefore, when I talk about the absence from the newspapers of what is going on the ground, I refer to the actual crimes that are committed every day. And none of these crimes is actually being represented in the coverage of the papers, because the agenda of the newspapers is not founded on or derived from a recognition of society, objective recognition of society in this country. The narrative and the agenda, they are based on non-recognition of society in this country and showing no respect to society, which is what the laissez-faire ideology is peddling and being peddled by a Johnson-fronted cabal. Johnson is upset, clearly, that the Farla scheme has given Rishi Sunak a kind of recognition of competence that he doesn't have. And that's why he is attacking Farla scheme. The Farla scheme is under attack for other genuine reasons, because it's inadequate in supporting the most in need, and it is actually being used by the already overly wealthy and overly unaccountable crooks operating under various big businesses. But that is not what Johnson is on about. Johnson is on about scrapping the Farla scheme and letting the laissez-faire mob take over. And Johnson, in that regard, is being exactly like Trump in the narrative, in the agenda. And so therefore the papers are part of that agenda. They're not bothered about society. And this is here. They're actually reflecting this on the Daily Mail front page. They're saying it's a completely untruthful headline in the Daily Mail. What it is saying is that people should not be asked to prevent the spread of the virus. Lockdown is one measure of preventing the spread of the virus. And it is saying world's top scientists. It never had any recognition of world's top scientists for ages. Suddenly they discovered. And this phrase, world's top scientists, is intended for the gullibles. The people who pick up the Daily Mail and go through this and they say, oh my God, world's top scientists are against the lockdown, so I must be as well. That's the gullibles being taken care of, completely subliminally kind of controlled to defy any safety measures that would keep people safe under the circumstances. And they have got, of course, on page 3, a picture apparently with Meghan Markle photographed with a money laundering gangster. That's the opposite on page 3 to the front page promotion of Kate and Wills, although they're saying that their own affair at the beginning was rockier than people realized. Well, it was rockier than people realized because the likes of the Daily Mail lied and overly glossed over any kind of difficulties they might have had and promoted them as the most kind of perfect relationship and romance. So it's the Daily Mail which lied before and it is lying now. And there are other things that are wrong with the lockdown practicalities, because like this column by Michael Gove's wife is headlined, well, her name, but I mean, it may have been written by a number of people as usual, but it's saying, what kind of country are we when a son can't hug his mother at a funeral, but can travel there on a packed train? Well, that is the kind of country that is produced by laissez-faire, lack of audit, lack of supervision, lack of accountability. That's what this country is like. And then there is this other piece on the Daily Mail about the money that is being stolen by the criminals under the cover of dealing with the corona. This is headline 26 billion pounds corona loans fiasco. Bounce back help for small farms swiped by fraudsters. Well, as I have been saying, as has been quite clear to all observers of laissez-faire and unaccountable society. And here is the Church of England put its own sex victims, own reputation above child sex victims, says excoriating report. It's a damnation of the church. Now that is absolutely the case. The state in Britain should be above corruption and above partisan, nepotistic covering up for crooks in big places or big positions. But all the parts of the state are controlled and occupied by mainly dishonest, criminal, unaccountable persons. So the victims are the children, victims of sexual abuse, women, victims of all kinds of violations, including persistent sexism at all levels, and of course racism that affects all the people, almost anyone that can be targeted by the racists, and there is no accountability. So the church is damned for its criminal complicity with the abusers of children, and the courts are not yet damned in that way, in that kind of way. But it should be, the courts should be damned as well, because the courts, as a last resort for seeking remedies against injustice and abuse and criminality, are not doing their job. The courts are complicit with the big criminals and the culture of criminality and the covering up for most of the biggest criminals and offenders in society. So we go back to the question of this Daily Mail narrative, and it is a narrative that is, on the one hand, they're giving a where they're presenting Kate on the opposite page of the coverage of damnation of the church. It shows that she is holier than the church itself. That's how they're showing her. She's holier than, and she is above all reproach, above all criticism. What are they doing, these criminals? They're brainwashing the people and they're hiding the truth. And they're giving this 10-year vision credit for Johnson to revitalize Britain out of rubble left by the COVID crisis. The booster's back, and he is being called the booster by their sketch writer, and he's doing the body dance. Now, this is insanity of the scale of the Daily Express. Boris Johnson cannot do any wrong, despite the fact that everything they publish about the contradictory government policy and the abuse of the funds and the waste of money is 26 billion taken by fraudsters, shows that Boris Johnson doesn't exist in the same bracket as governance and delivery and government and competence. And Trump has been kind of deleted. Trump's tweet or post on Facebook has been deleted because he perpetrated one lie too often. That is the lie that he says that flu was worse than the pandemic, the virus. And the Daily Mail is now giving, it has failed to produce a Churchillian kind of performance by Boris Johnson. So it's now reverted back to Margaret Thatcher. And it's now criminally confecting this thing that he is now come back. He has staged a comeback, and it is the biggest comeback since Margaret Thatcher. That's what it's saying. And who is saying it? It's none other than Stephen Glover, who only weeks ago derided Boris Johnson on all counts. So what are these liars expecting people to believe? They change their tune, and the evidence remains the same, but they change their tune and their tone and their kind of alliances and allegiance to this problem. And they're calling in the editorial, they're calling it a dazzling vision. Boris Johnson has got a dazzling vision of post-COVID Britain. It's no longer post-Brexit. Brexit has been completely exposed as absolute rubbish. So they're now saying post-COVID Britain as if it's within their power to kind of wish COVID away, despite the fact that they are wrongly advising, wrongly devising, and they're failing at every stage. And it has got a second editorial praising the 4,000 leading scientists' signature, declaring Draconian restrictions were inflicting irreparable damage on society, including countless non-COVID deaths, mental breakdowns, and job losses. Now, this is a part of the narrative, part of the agenda, not part of the evidence. If there are 4,000 scientists saying exactly that, then there must be at least 400,000 scientists saying the opposite. But they're not saying it because that's not part of the narrative they are running this so-called journalism on. It's not journalism. They are actually doing the brainwashing, the Daily Mail. And it doesn't matter what it says one day. It can change completely opposite the next day. Because the whole of the last week, they were running this serial based on Tom Bauer's book about Boris Johnson. And it was full of evidence as related and retailed by Tom Bauer that Boris Johnson is not trustable and all the other things. And now they are promoting him to a dazzling visionary. It's beyond Margaret Thatcher and Winston Churchill combined. So who is the more dangerous loony? The Daily Mail or Boris Johnson himself? It's not a newspaper. It's not reporting news. And then there this Robert Lacey, who is another one, who is the kind of, if Tom Bauer is the biographer who brings out notorious kind of tomes about public figures in this country, then Robert Lacey is the one that is always there at the ready to give a gloss to the royal family or the name of the royal kind of institution. And he is doing this about Kate Middleton and they're saying that the Middleton matriarchs behind Kate's mettle. I mean, they would never say that for Meghan Markle. In fact, they're saying the opposite against Meghan Markle. So they're racists and they're completely irresponsible when it comes to telling the society the truth. And they found an African princess who was Victoria's goddaughter. I mean, how many African ordinary people, not the princess or the African royalty, how many African people are murdered and massacred in the hundreds of years of slavery and colonialism? They don't say that. So the Daily Mail is completely corrupt and racist and in denial about everything that is wrong with the government and the Conservative Party, and also with the parliament that we have in this country so far. Because the parliament is reduced to the point where it was the dream of the Conservatives to consign it to. It doesn't matter because they've got it. They've got 80 MPs majority in the House of Commons, so they can do anything. And the parliament doesn't count. That's the point. It's a given that they will be passing every bill that they can put forward. And they can do anything, and there is nothing that the Labour Party is doing to oppose it. If the number's not there for the votes, then there should be a vocal opposition maintained throughout by the Labour Party. But there is no evidence that Starmer wants to maintain any opposition at all. Anyone who even ritualistically stages a kind of democratic option and votes against the Tory motion, Starmer sacks them if they are in his bogus shadow cabinet. Now, a small country like Kyrgyzstan in Central Asia is witnessing democratic fervor. Like yesterday, they stormed parliament and demanded the resignation of the president. And there was a night of rioting in which one person was killed and about 600 injured. And President Suronbay Jinbekov said political forces were trying to illegally seize state power in the Central Asian country. Demonstrators also breached national security headquarters and freed the former president, whose party could say it had overthrown the criminal government. Kyrgyzstan's Central Election Commission said yesterday it had invalidated Sunday's parliamentary poll amid allegations of vote rigging. Now, that is Kyrgyzstan in Central Asia. But we are not saying that the exact kind of violence should be seen in this country. But there is evidence that people are thinking. They're cognitive and they're thinking. And in Britain, there is no thinking, there is no sign of any real demonstration against the illegal, internationally judged, illegal and unlawful and immoral and antisocial behavior of this corrupt government. And the Financial Times is saying that Johnson yesterday was denying that he has been defeated by COVID, that his mojo, apparently he had a mojo, has been stolen by the COVID crisis. This is not, the Financial Times is not reporting the financial state of the country. And it's not talking about the accountability to the ordinary public of the financial institutions and financial traders. And it's not running any evidential reporting on the correlations between people's contributions and the people's actual income, using as a mechanism, as a tool of analysis that Karl Marx devised, the surplus labor. Surplus labor should be the tool to examine the behavior of the big biz criminals and fraudsters and other assorted organized criminal gangs that use Britain and the British city of London as the offshore location to fleece trillions out of the world and the world's people. In the Financial Times, the headline about Johnson's vision, which is supposedly green vision, we condemned the Guardian yesterday for over promoting that. And the Financial Times saying that Johnson is emitting hot air on this. which is moderately put accurate, because Johnson is just using this as a slogan. Johnson doesn't have any conviction at all. And there is a letter on the Financial Times, apparently written by Anthea Jeffrey, head of policy research, South African Institute of Race Relations, Johannesburg, South Africa. And the headline is, South Africans' priority is jobs, not black empowerment. Now, how does she kind of find any kind of discord between the two? Why can't she accept both? Why should she attack black empowerment by posing as alternative the lack of jobs? I mean, why not have both black power, if you like, equal power? That is what I understand that to be, against the years of institutional racism and exclusion and colonialism. Because remember, the apartheid South Africa was only a continuation of the British colonized South Africa. So apartheid was something that the British didn't actually oppose. They gave rise to it, which is why Margaret Thatcher called Nelson Mandela a terrorist. It wasn't a difficult thing for her to say. That is the easiest thing she could say. And Winston Churchill called M.K. Gandhi the naked fakir. These are natural phrases, products of the completely ignorant and racist mindset. And there is this woman from India doing a piece about callous response by the government of Modi to violent rape. Now, that is not something that is happening only in India. Of course, the size of the numbers of victims of rape and mass gang rapes and murders of the victims of rape in India is bigger in comparison, numerically simply, than what is happening in Bangladesh. Because in the last nearly fortnight of the outrage genuinely expressed about after the gang rape in the MC College in Sylhet, there have been other cases of rape. And in Noakhali, there has who tied her husband while they were abusing her in that way. So there is evidence that the Bangladesh government is behaving identically to the Indian government, as if they are any better. The Pakistan government is not doing any better when it comes to dealing with rape and rapists. So all these three main countries, numerically main countries, are failing to protect women from rape and sexual violence and murders. So we are saying, not just about Bangladesh, we are saying that rape must be made to disappear from India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. There must be no rape in any of these countries, and no rapist must live in these countries. So we are extending the call to include both India and Pakistan, in addition to Bangladesh, because we started calling for that to happen only in Bangladesh, but now we are extending this. Now, this woman is saying So the writer is saying that the gang rape of the 23-year-old woman on a bus in Delhi 8 years ago happened when the Brahmins, BJP and Modi were in opposition, and they made maximum political capital out of that, and it helped them get elected. But now the country has been turned into a spying state. Any opposition is treated as subversive, and people are being spied on en masse, and there are various investigative reporters and journalists and others, campaigners, have been exposed, and they're embarrassing, kind of treated to embarrassing targeting by having their private conversations leaked and the WhatsApp kind of conversations leaked and transcript released to the various online publishing platforms. But she is not concluding that the BJP is the evil that it is, because she's saying that caste-based gender violence has a long, ignoble history in India. So she's excusing the BJP and the Modi regime. And she's not really focusing on the real rape which is happening against Muslims and Muslim women. And that gives the Financial Times away as a racist, anti-Muslim outfit. So we haven't got anything of substance from any of these papers. We have discussed the Guardian, we have discussed the Daily Mail, and we have discussed the Financial Times now. And there is nothing in the contents of these papers that shows that they are remotely doing journalism. They're doing kind of pieces to suit the particular opportunistic agenda of the day. But they're never, even by mistake, going to tell the truth about their mistakes and their errors and their collusion and complicity with the violators of the rights of the victims of the violence and violations. On the question of Bangladesh and the MC College gang rape, I think there is a lot that needs to be added to the commentary that is being published in Bangladesh and the comments being published in Bangladesh by various spokespersons. As I have said before, on the evidence, not because I want to say that, but on the evidence, every single source, either party political or so-called newspaper or media, has been circumspect, kind of self-denying. They are not really telling the full truth or anywhere near the full truth. And starting with Bangladesh, I would say, and I have been saying, that the reason why rape and violence against women in Bangladesh must stop is because of the founding cracks on the core of the promise of Bangladesh. Bangladesh was freed from the oppressors whose army raped Bangladeshi women. So how is that possible, that rape to be done by members of the ruling Awami League party and its various allied youth wings and perpetrators? That is something that is totally incompatible with the promise of Bangladesh. Freedom is meaningless to the victims of rape, of violence and violations. And that is where we should begin to establish, after 50 years, the promise on which Bangladesh was liberated and argued for. So, no rape in Bangladesh, and no rapists must live in Bangladesh. And that includes the violators in Noakhali or in the other parts of the country where other rapists and violators are attacking women and children, young and girls, And that must be brought to an end. No argument. No need for an argument. And rapists must not live in Bangladesh. So we shall be continuing this in the next part, which is part B.